Hello, my name is Austin Jones, and today I will be talking about communicating across cultures. Every culture has its own rules for communicating. These rules are typically subconscious and have developed over time within the culture. Unless we are consciously aware of the differences, we will not be able to communicate effectively with those from other cultures. Our nation is increasingly becoming global. Companies need employees who can communicate effectively with people from different cultures. Additionally, the workforce is also becoming more diverse, both ethnically and culturally. In this speech, I will discuss the different dimensions of communication across cultures. I will also discuss the sources of miscommunication and cross-cultural exchanges. And lastly, I will discuss tips for communicating with people among various cultures. When communicating across cultures, keep in mind that there are many dimensions of culture. In 2010, Carol Gutman wrote an article titled Communicating Across Cultures for the American Management Association. He identified three different dimensions of culture, which are high context versus low context, sequential versus synchronic, and effective versus neutral. Low context cultures communicate heavily through electronic messages, whereas high context cultures value face-to-face communication. Additionally, in low context cultures, messages are very direct and specific, but in high context cultures, it is expected that you will make inferences about what was said to understand the message by using nonverbal cues, body language, and your relationship with that person to know what they are saying. Sequential cultures are guided by the time clock and calendar. Beginning and ending times are pre-planned and are strict, kind of like here in the United States. Synchronic cultures view time as fluid, like a continuous cycle with a relaxed view on beginning and ending times, such as countries over in Europe. Some cultures are more effective, which means that they show their emotions freely and openly. Neutral cultures keep their feelings to themselves and are very cautious and controlled. Now that I have discussed the cultural dimensions of communication, let me move on to my next point, which is sources of miscommunication and cross-cultural exchanges. In 2004, Larry Barra wrote an article entitled Stumbling Blocks in Intercultural Communication. He identified 6 different sources of miscommunication. First, you have the assumption of similarities. Our tendency to think how we behave and act is the universally accepted rule of behavior. When someone differs in behavior, we have a negative view of them. Second, we have language differences. Problems occur when there is an inability to understand what the other is saying because different languages are being spoken. Additionally, differences in vocabulary, syntax, idioms, slang, and dialects also cause difficulty. Third, we have nonverbal misinterpretation. The way we express ourselves through body language, eye contact, gestures, and the way we dress can always be misinterpreted. Fourth, preconceptions and stereotypes. This is putting people into predefined categories depending on how we think they are or should be. This can interfere with being able to see things objectively. Fifth, we have the tendency to evaluate. The tendency to approve or disapprove actions based on our own beliefs instead of sincerely trying to comprehend the thoughts or feelings of someone else. Each person's culture or way of life always seems like the right one. This type of bias prevents open-mindedness. Lastly, we have high anxiety. Anxiety can result when people are not sure how to act or behave when around someone from another culture. It often underlies and compounds the stumbling blocks that are above. Now that I have discussed the sources of miscommunication and cross-cultural exchanges, I'll move on to my final point, which is the fundamental tips for communicating with people among various cultures. This article discussed many great tips for communicating across cultures. There are several that I felt were more important than others. Research cross-cultural etiquette so you are aware of what to expect. Do not make assumptions. If you are in doubt about what someone from a different culture prefers, you should ask them. Do not rush when speaking. Speak slowly and calmly. Do not use slang. It does not translate between the cultures. Listen actively and check for understanding often. Know that different cultures can have different tones. Their tone might not mean the same thing as in your own culture. In conclusion, unless we are aware of communication differences, we will not be able to communicate effectively with people from other cultures. It is helpful to be knowledgeable of the different dimensions of communication across cultures, the sources of miscommunication and cross-cultural exchanges, and be familiar with tips for communicating with people among various cultures. I believe this information will make a positive difference when communicating with people from diverse backgrounds.